6 months earlier, at Easter dinner, Patricia Whitmore had stood at the head of her daughter Lauren's dining room table and raised a glass of wine. 25 relatives filled the house. Tulips lined the windows. Linen napkins sat folded like small declarations of success. Patricia smiled warmly at everyone before turning her attention to her youngest daughter. "We're all rooting for Caroline," she said in a voice that sounded gentle but carried across the room. "One day she'll put a roof over her own head." A few people chuckled. Lauren tilted her head sympathetically. Thomas Whitmore cut his ham into small, careful pieces and said nothing. Caroline did not respond. She sat still, her glass of sparkling water untouched, her expression unreadable. Before I continue, I want to take a quick moment to thank everyone who has subscribed and supported this channel. Truly, it means more to me than you know. If you haven't subscribed yet, please take a second to do so. It's completely free, and it really helps support this channel and stories like this. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Patricia believed she understood the full shape of her daughter's life: a rented studio apartment, a practical car, a quiet job in that computer field. She believed Caroline was drifting. What she did not know was that the story she had told for 13 years was already collapsing. And Caroline had decided she would not correct her mother with words. She would correct her with facts. 3 years earlier, Caroline had been living in a 540-square-foot studio apartment in southeast Portland. The single window rattled when delivery trucks passed, and the kitchen faucet dripped in a slow, stubborn rhythm that she never quite managed to fix. She worked as a cybersecurity analyst at a mid-size firm downtown, earning $68,000 a year before taxes. Her student loan payment was $1,400 each month. She tracked every dollar in a spreadsheet on her phone. Rice, frozen vegetables, bulk chicken. She planned meals with the precision she used at work. She drove a 2011 Honda Civic with a cracked dashboard. None of it embarrassed her. It was simply where she was starting. What frustrated her was the narrative circulating at family gatherings. Patricia described her as unstable, as if her career were temporary. Lauren's home in Lake Oswego, purchased at 27, was held up as proof of discipline and maturity. Caroline never corrected the comparison. She believed the truth would eventually speak for itself. She just did not yet know how loud it would need to be. The truth began with a phone call on a Tuesday night in November 2022. Caroline was sitting on her apartment floor reviewing firewall configurations for a hospital client when her phone buzzed. The caller ID read Samuel Reed. He rarely called. When she answered, his voice carried the weight of hesitation. "Caroline," he said, "there's something you deserve to know." He explained that he had been present at the credit union the year she turned 18. The custodial college account in her name, funded since childhood, had not been lost in the market, as Patricia had claimed. It had been withdrawn in full. $42,380. The authorization bore Patricia's signature. The money had been transferred into a joint account shared by Patricia and Thomas. 2 weeks later, Lauren closed on her first home. Samuel kept copies of the official bank statements. He had held them for nearly a decade, waiting. Caroline did not cry when the call ended. She sat still and calculated. If that money had remained invested at even a modest average return over 13 years, it would have grown significantly. The loss was not only financial. It was structural. Caroline understood something immediately. Confronting Patricia without evidence would only turn her into the aggressor. Patricia excelled at redirecting conflict. She reframed, softened, explained, and reassigned blame until reality blurred. So instead of calling her mother, Caroline opened her laptop at 2 in the morning and built a different plan. 3 columns appeared on a new spreadsheet: income, savings rate, long-term target. She increased her automated investment contribution to 40% of her paycheck. She accepted a demanding leadership assignment at work when her vice president, Diane Prescott, offered it. The hospital audit project required 12-hour days and relentless precision. Caroline delivered it ahead of deadline. Within a year she was promoted to team lead. 6 months later she stepped into a director role. Her salary rose to $145,000 plus performance bonus. She did not announce any of it to her family. She updated her spreadsheets quietly. The silence was no longer passive. It was strategic. Each promotion was a brick. Each investment contribution was mortar. She was building something that could not be argued with. 18 months after Samuel's call, Caroline drove through the West Hills on a gray Saturday morning. Douglas firs lined the winding roads, and mist hovered low in the valley. She had spent 2 years investing steadily, diversifying into broad index funds and employee equity. With disciplined growth and bonuses reinvested, her portfolio had crossed a threshold she once thought unreachable. When she saw the house, a 4-bedroom property with floor-to-ceiling windows and a wide deck overlooking the city, she did not react emotionally. She went home and ran the numbers twice. The purchase would be aggressive but sustainable. 3 weeks later, she signed closing documents in a quiet title office and accepted the keys. She moved in gradually, furnishing one room at a time. A gray couch. A solid maple dining table found in Selwood. She told no one in her family. Not yet. The house was not a performance. It was a boundary made visible. And when Easter arrived, she knew exactly when she would invite Lauren to tea. On Easter Sunday, Lauren's house was full before noon. Cars lined the cul-de-sac, and voices spilled out each time the front door opened. Patricia moved through the rooms like a curator guiding guests through an exhibit. She praised the faro and ball paint in the living room, the refinished oak floors, the extended deck Nathan had supervised. Every compliment eventually circled back to Lauren's discipline and foresight. Caroline arrived in a navy blouse and jeans, understated and calm. She hugged relatives, kissed her niece Lucy on the forehead, and accepted a glass of sparkling water. Patricia found her quickly. "You look tired," she said softly. "Working too hard in that tech job." The words carried just enough volume to travel. Caroline smiled politely. During dessert, Patricia lifted her glass again. "Lauren has built something beautiful. That's what a real plan looks like." A few relatives glanced toward Caroline. Lauren leaned close and whispered, "Are you jealous?" Caroline held her sister's gaze without blinking. "You should come by for tea next Saturday," she said evenly. "I've moved." The room shifted almost imperceptibly. Patricia frowned. "Moved where?" Caroline shrugged. "I'll text you the address." She put on her coat and left before anyone could press further. Saturday arrived clear and bright. Caroline baked lemon blueberry scones that morning, more to steady her hands than to impress anyone. The house smelled of citrus and warm sugar. Sunlight poured through the wall of glass in the living room, turning the hardwood floors golden. She arranged 2 ceramic mugs on the maple table and set the teapot between them. At exactly 2:03 p.m., gravel crunched in the driveway. Lauren's SUV idled longer than necessary before the engine shut off. Through the front window, Caroline watched her sister step out slowly, purse hanging loosely from her hand. Lauren stood still, studying the facade as if it contradicted a deeply held assumption. When Caroline opened the door, Lauren's eyes moved upward to the vaulted ceiling, then across the open living space toward the valley view. She walked forward without speaking, touching the back of the sofa, the edge of the granite island, the frame of the window. "This is yours?" she finally asked. "Yes," Caroline replied. "I bought it in January." Lauren's composure wavered. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. "Mom," she said when Patricia answered, "you need to come here right now." Patricia arrived in less than 20 minutes, Thomas close behind her. She stepped into the entryway and stopped mid-stride. Her eyes traveled across the room, measuring ceiling height, window span, the sweep of the staircase. For several seconds she said nothing. "What is this?" she asked finally. "My home," Caroline answered. Patricia turned sharply. "How could you possibly afford this?" Caroline explained calmly, her promotions, her salary increases, her disciplined investments. She clarified the timeline, team lead, then director, then senior director within 2.5 years. Her compensation now supported the mortgage comfortably. Thomas, who had remained near the doorway, walked forward slowly. His eyes were wet. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly, the words unfamiliar in the air between them. Patricia stared at him, unsettled. Lauren sank onto the edge of the couch, visibly disoriented. The narrative Patricia had maintained for years no longer fit the evidence in front of her. The house was not rented. It was not temporary. It stood solid and undeniable. And the silence this time was not theatrical. It was structural, reshaping the room. Lauren's confusion shifted into something sharper. "But you had massive student loans," she said. "You said you were still paying them." "I was," Caroline replied. "And I paid them." Lauren shook her head, trying to reconcile numbers she had never bothered to examine. Caroline walked to her desk and retrieved a manila envelope. She placed it on the kitchen table beside the teapot. "There's something else," she said. Before Patricia could interrupt, the front door opened again. Samuel Reed stepped inside, holding another copy of the bank records. Patricia's posture stiffened immediately. Samuel laid the documents flat. The custodial account opened for Caroline in 2004, he said evenly. $42,380 withdrawn in March 2013. Authorized by Patricia Whitmore. Transferred to joint checking account. Lauren's face drained of color. Mom, she whispered, scanning the signature. You told me that was your savings. Patricia's voice rose in defense. It was family money. I did what was necessary. Caroline did not raise her own voice. It was in my name, she said. For my education. Thomas lowered himself into a chair, staring at the paper as if seeing it for the first time. The room settled into a heavy stillness. Lauren pressed her palms against the table. I didn't know, she said, tears forming despite her effort to remain composed. Caroline believed her. Lauren had never asked questions, she had accepted the version presented to her. You could have told me, Lauren added weakly. Would you have believed me? Caroline asked. Lauren did not answer. Patricia attempted once more to regain control. Everything I've done has been for this family, she insisted. You were fine on your own, Caroline. Lauren needed help. Caroline met her mother's eyes without anger. Being capable doesn't make it fair, she said. And telling everyone I was struggling when I wasn't, that wasn't help. That was narrative. The distinction landed. Patricia had no immediate reply. Caroline poured tea into 2 mugs and set one in front of Lauren. I'm not asking for the money back, she continued steadily. I built my life without it. But from now on, no more rewriting my story. Outside, the wind moved through the fir trees, steady and unbothered. Inside the house, something fundamental had shifted, and it would not return to its old shape. The fallout began quietly but moved quickly. By Sunday evening, relatives who had attended Easter were already comparing details. Nathan told his sister what he had witnessed. She told her husband. Lauren, shaken and exhausted, confirmed the bank statement to Aunt Claire over the phone. Once Claire knew, the rest of the extended family followed. By Monday morning, Caroline's phone began to ring. Some callers sounded apologetic. Others sounded embarrassed. We honestly believed your mother, one aunt admitted. She made it seem like you were barely getting by. Caroline answered calmly. She did not dramatize. She simply stated facts. The custodial account existed. It had been withdrawn. The documentation was clear. What surprised her most was not anger from relatives, but silence. No one rushed to defend Patricia. For years, Patricia had controlled the family narrative by speaking first and speaking confidently. Now there was a document on a kitchen table in West Hills with her signature at the bottom. Ink does not argue. It does not reinterpret itself. It sits there and waits. One by one, invitations that once centered around Patricia began to shift in tone. The authority she had relied on was no longer automatic. 3 days later, Lauren called. Caroline stood on her deck watching a red-tailed hawk circle above the valley when her phone vibrated. Lauren did not waste time. I've been thinking about that account, she said. Her voice sounded stripped of polish. I never asked where the money came from. I just accepted it. Caroline listened without interrupting. Lauren admitted that she had been eager for the house, eager for approval, eager to meet the timeline Patricia celebrated. Nathan says I've been measuring everything by Mom's standards, she confessed. Even our marriage. That detail caught Caroline's attention. Lauren continued, explaining that Nathan had grown tired of Patricia's constant involvement, advice about parenting Lucy, comments about decor, suggestions about his career. He said he married me, not her, Lauren said quietly. Caroline felt something soften. For the first time, Lauren was speaking as herself rather than as an extension of their mother. I don't need you to rewrite the past, Caroline told her. I just need you to stop pretending it didn't happen. Lauren agreed. The conversation ended without theatrics, but with something more important, recognition. Patricia called 2 weeks after the confrontation. Caroline was in her kitchen preparing dinner when her phone lit up. She let it ring twice before answering. Patricia's voice lacked its usual projection. No one is returning my calls, she began. Your aunt says she needs space. The word sounded foreign on her tongue. Caroline leaned against the counter and waited. Patricia attempted explanation rather than denial this time. I thought Lauren needed stability, she said. You were always independent. I assumed you'd be fine. Caroline kept her tone measured. That wasn't your decision to make. A long pause followed. The clock in Patricia's kitchen ticked faintly through the receiver. "Can we go back to normal?" Patricia asked. Caroline shook her head even though her mother could not see it. "No. But we can go forward if you're honest." Silence stretched again, not hostile but uncertain. "I don't know how," Patricia admitted. It was the first admission of limitation Caroline had ever heard from her mother. "Start there," Caroline replied gently. The call ended without resolution, but it was not defensive. That alone marked change. The following Saturday, Thomas arrived at Caroline's house alone. He stood on the porch holding a small toolbox. "Your deck railing looked loose last time," he said. Caroline stepped aside to let him in. He spent an hour tightening bolts and adjusting supports without speaking much. The quiet felt different from the silence of past family dinners. It was present, not avoidant. When he finished, they sat on the deck with coffee. The valley stretched wide beneath them, early summer light washing the fir trees in muted green. Thomas cleared his throat. "I should have looked closer at the account years ago," he said. "I trusted what I was shown." Caroline appreciated that he did not hide behind excuses. "You trusted your wife," she answered. He nodded slowly. "I'm trying to do better now." The statement was simple, but sincere. Caroline realized that growth would not arrive in dramatic gestures. It would arrive in small visits, tightened railings, and conversations that did not dodge responsibility. When Thomas left, he hugged her briefly. The gesture felt earned rather than overdue. Summer brought another milestone. At work, Caroline was promoted to Vice President of Security Operations after 3 years of steady performance. Diane Prescott introduced her during a company-wide meeting, outlining the hospital audit success, the client renewals, and the expansion of her team. 200 employees watched as Caroline accepted the role without fanfare. Her salary increased again, but more importantly, her authority did. She returned home that evening to the quiet comfort of her living room. The house no longer felt like proof, it felt like space. She did not call Patricia with the news. She no longer needed parental validation to measure achievement. Instead, she invited Samuel for dinner. He arrived with a bottle of Willamette Valley Pinot Noir and a knowing smile. As they ate on the deck, he mentioned something Caroline had never been told. The college account had originally been opened by her grandmother, who deposited $50 each month from her own Social Security check. The revelation tightened Caroline's throat. The fund had begun not with Patricia, but with quiet love. The betrayal was real, but so was the intention behind its origin. And that mattered. Caroline did not sleep much the night Samuel told her about her grandmother. She sat at the maple table long after the dishes were cleared, turning the information over carefully. The account had not begun as a strategic investment or a parental obligation. It had started as an act of devotion from a woman who believed in her future before she could spell the word. The next morning, Caroline drove to the small cemetery where her grandmother was buried. She stood beside the headstone, brushed fallen leaves away, and spoke quietly. "I built it anyway," she said. There was no anger in her voice, only acknowledgement. She understood now that the money had been stolen, but the intention behind it had not been erased. It had simply changed form. The house on the hill, the career she built, the boundary she drew, those were extensions of the same quiet faith. When she left the cemetery, she felt lighter. Not because everything was repaired, but because the story had widened. It no longer centered only on betrayal. It included resilience. In early autumn, a letter arrived with Patricia's handwriting on the envelope. Caroline recognized the careful cursive immediately. She opened it slowly at the kitchen counter. The note was brief and unpolished. Patricia did not justify her actions. She did not blame Samuel or redirect the narrative. She wrote that she had confused control with protection, that she had prioritized appearances over fairness. "I made choices that were not mine to make," the letter read. "I am trying to understand why." There was no dramatic apology, only a beginning. Caroline read it twice before folding it neatly. She placed it in the desk drawer beside the house deed and the bank statement. 3 documents now rested together: proof of loss, proof of ownership, and proof of effort. They did not cancel each other out. They coexisted. Caroline did not call Patricia immediately. Growth, she had learned, required time to settle. But she felt something shift inside her, not forgiveness exactly, but openness. A door unlocked does not guarantee someone will enter differently. It only makes the possibility real. Thanksgiving approached cautiously that year. Lauren called first. "I'd like you there," she said. "Mom will be there too." Caroline considered the invitation carefully. "I'll come," she replied, "but I'll drive myself." When she arrived, the atmosphere felt altered. Lauren greeted her without performance. Nathan offered a quiet nod of respect. Lucy ran forward and wrapped her arms around Caroline's legs. Patricia emerged from the kitchen and paused. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Patricia stepped forward. "I'm glad you came," she said plainly. The tone lacked rehearsal. During dinner, no one compared square footage or mortgages. No one measured careers against home decor. Conversation centered on Lucy's preschool stories and Nathan's new project at work. Caroline watched her mother closely. Patricia spoke less, listened more. It was not a transformation, but it was movement. After dessert, Caroline excused herself early as promised. As she walked toward the door, Patricia followed. "Thank you," she said quietly. Caroline nodded. "We're moving forward," she replied. It was not reconciliation. It was direction. Winter returned to the hills with slow gray mornings and steady rain. Caroline often sat by the living room windows with coffee, watching clouds drift through the valley below. She thought about the years she had spent accepting a smaller version of herself to preserve family peace. She thought about how silence, once used to endure, had eventually become strategy. The house no longer symbolized victory. It symbolized authorship. She had chosen the door, the windows, the view. She had chosen who entered and under what terms. Patricia called occasionally now, sometimes simply to ask how work was going. The conversations were careful but respectful. Lauren continued meeting her monthly at a small coffee shop, both sisters learning to speak without inherited scripts. Thomas visited often, sometimes bringing small repair tools, sometimes just bringing himself. The family was not perfectly healed. There were still pauses, still sensitivities. But the foundation had shifted. Truth had replaced assumption. Accountability had replaced narrative control. And Caroline no longer felt the need to prove anything aloud. One evening in early spring, almost a year after that Easter dinner, Caroline stood on her deck as the sun dipped behind the fir trees. The air carried the scent of rain and cedar. Inside, the fire crackled softly against stone she had chosen herself. She thought about the moment her mother had once declared that she could not put a roof over her own head. The irony no longer stung. It felt distant, almost instructive. Caroline understood now that success was not measured in square footage, nor in public approval, nor in silence mistaken for weakness. It was measured in integrity, the ability to stand inside one's own life without apology. The house did not define her. The bank statement did not define her. Even her mother's letter did not define her. What defined her was the decision she made that November night years earlier, to build rather than argue, to invest rather than confront prematurely, to let evidence speak where emotion could not. The wind moved steadily through the trees. Caroline stepped back inside, locked the door, and turned off the porch light. The story was no longer being written for her. It was being written by her. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with someone who might need the reminder. I'll see you in the next one.